it's interesting if he's breaking the law and then you break the law. As Mark said, it'd be interesting in court.
Do you get like a sign printed up, you hold up to the drone saying, if you don't fly away, I will shoot you down? And then you give a fair warning.
10 seconds. So you have a sign ready?
Yeah.
Prepared, just as the air rifle, where you have one or the other. In an air rifle or a sign, one or the other.
Yeah.
At every window.
It is an absolutely bizarre situation. What is wrong with these people?
5 university law faculties have now rejected ties with the law firm Russell McVeigh while it conducts an independent review into incidents of sexual misconduct and its culture. Otago, Canterbury, Waikato, AUT and Vic are rejecting any recruitment publicity or Russell McVeigh-related events on their campuses. So extra pressure, panellists. It'll be interesting to see if Russell McVeigh can maintain its government department associations or the big firms it's associated with like Spark and Trustpower. At the moment, all that seems to be that they're just riding out the storm. Do you think this will blow over to a certain extent, or do you sense an ongoing determination to change law firm culture? And
I think there's a determination, and the excellent piece from Linda Clark in the spin-off was very well written from someone who guides young women lawyers and has been involved in diversity programs. She says the profession needs to be honest with itself, it needs to listen to young women, and it needs to do much more to ensure these women are not subjected to harassment. Having said that, I would say there are large accounting firms, which I won't mention, but you know, there would
Probably
be...
the ones in Greater Manchester.
It would bound to be. And accounting firms we seem to be heading for today as well. Yeah. You know, larger accounting firms, big, well-known ones that have the same kind of set up, the boozy nights, the young students, the whatever. We've all got to look at it.
Okay, if you take the booze out of law firms is one...
It's not that.
Is that irrelevant? Is that like, you know, telling women not to wear short skirts, which we discussed yesterday?
No, it's irrelevant. You just have to know what is right and what is bloody wrong.
But if you don't know that...
Then if you're a young woman...
Hang on a second. You're a lawyer who doesn't know what's right and wrong. What were you doing in law school for the last 4 years?
But it's also about the same age males who, you know, to pull them up on it and go, hey, that's not okay.
Yeah.
It's not just about the women. It's about your associates going, you are being an idiot. Stop it.
Are not these law schools being profoundly disingenuous in saying, oh, here's this one law firm where there's profound naughtiness going on. We will sever ties with them. We're supposed to believe that none of these law schools have had any ties with this particular law firm, such that they might have had an inkling that this nonsense was going on until now. And suddenly going, oh dear Lord, we mustn't have anything to do with them.
It's been going on for years.
Of course it has. They must have graduates who've gone into these schools and then had some contact back with the faculties and said, and word must have got out. They're suddenly saying, oh dear, we don't want to be tarnished by association.
Linda makes a real point. She's saying these poor women, it's 2 years after the fact, right now, and the whole thing's been brought up again. It's just so unfair on these women, and they don't want to come forward.
No, sadly, unfortunately, the only way it could be dealt with is to have to rehash the narrative, unfortunately. But yeah, you're basically assaulting them all over again, aren't you?
Yeah.
In the UK, a survey finds 2/3 of women lawyers have experienced sexual harassment at work. And cited there is the training dynamic of pupil barristers working closely for long hours, often late evenings, with senior influential lawyers, i.e. the high-risk environment.
Yeah. Well, again, it's your associate. You need to be saying to them, it's not okay.
Sandy Hodge has been on the panel today with Steve McCabe. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
Good to see both of you, and we are back tomorrow. Thanks for your company, everybody. Checkpoint with John Campbell coming up.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, what do a vacuum cleaner salesman, a former army negotiator, a former headmaster and a former policeman have in common? This isn't a dad joke. The answer is they were all EQC assessors. Tonight, the people who purchased homes in Christchurch after the quake with botched repairs, who didn't know the homes were damaged and are now hundreds of thousands of dollars out of pocket. Also tonight, Auckland Mayor Phil Goff says staggering school times could be a solution to Auckland's traffic woes. The Taranaki settlement still without power 10 days after Geeta. We're in Dargaville as people turn out to protest Teagle's plans to build the country's biggest chicken farm. And Bill English, he arrived in 1990. Tonight he's delivering his valedictory speech. In fact, he's just done it.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Bat and tēnei. The Education Minister Chris Hipkins says mergers might be needed to secure the future of New Zealand's cash-strapped 16 polytechnics. The government has warned that most institutes of technology and polytechnics will be making deficits within 5 years because of falling enrolments due to high employment and fewer school leavers. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
Chris Hipkins met Polytechnic leaders in Auckland today to discuss solutions to the institute's growing financial problems. He says having 16 autonomous polytechnics might not be the best way of organising the sector, and mergers or some other form of cooperation might be needed. Mr Hipkins says the government is still developing a plan, but today he announced the end of competitive tendering for low-level courses. The system has directed millions of dollars of subsidies from polytechnics to private institutions since it was introduced in 2012. Ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
An advocate for the victim of the Riverhead Quarry attack says today's guilty verdicts are not a cause to celebrate, but a day to reflect. Colin Jack Mitchell was found guilty today in the High Court in Auckland of kidnapping, causing grievous bodily harm and assaulting a woman with intent to sexually violate her. Speaking on behalf of the victim, an advocate said for each individual with a rape conviction in New Zealand, there are 99 victims where the offender was not convicted.
As important as addressing the causes of climate change, we need to ensure New Zealand is a place that we actually want our children, brothers, sisters and friends to grow up in.
Mitchell will be sentenced in May. The Crown will seek a sentence of preventive detention. Nearly 100 people have turned out to protest against plans to build New Zealand's biggest chicken farm next to a marae just south of Dargaville. Tegel Foods is seeking resource consent to raise 9 million chickens a year on land that's currently a dairy farm at Arapohui. The farm would be within 350 metres of Kapehu Marae, angering locals who marched down the main street of Dargaville today to the Kaipara District Council building. The council has given the public 1 month to give feedback and make submissions on the proposal, but local resident Rosie Donovan says that's not enough time.
Tegel's massive proposal to put in a factory farm, a very industrial in our rural area that will completely change the landscape and the quality of life for all of the locals.
Protester Rosie Donovan. Tegel says it voluntarily sought public notification of its resource consent application because it realises that a chicken farm is of significant interest to the Arapohui community. It says it's committed to working with locals through the process. All 6 of the country's university law schools have cut ties with the law firm Russell McVeigh. Auckland University is the most recent to do so. The company is in the spotlight over serious allegations levelled at 2 senior lawyers at its Wellington office 2 years ago and separate revelations of alcohol-fuelled sex in a boardroom. The Auckland Dean of Law, Andrew Stockley, says Russell McVeigh should have made a much stronger apology and publicly recognised the harm that some women law students have experienced. Consumer New Zealand is warning against people buying second-hand tickets from the ticket resale website Viagogo. A woman bought her grandson and daughter-in-law tickets to last night's Bruno Mars Auckland concert from the website for $700, only to find they were fake. The Consumer NZ Chief Executive Sue Chetwin says regulators in Australia are investigating the Swiss site, and so is New Zealand.
We certainly have joined other consumer organisations around the world. We've investigated them. You know, their tickets are shonky quite a lot of the time, and we think people should avoid them.
Sue Chetwin says it's difficult to get hold of Viagogo to place a complaint, even though they encourage customers to do so. She says if ticket holders are in doubt, they should contact Ticketmaster. Viagogo referred RNZ to its frequently asked questions webpage. The former Prime Minister and National Leader Bill English has bid an emotional farewell in his valedictory speech in Parliament. The 56-year-old from Dipton officially signed off this afternoon, 27 years after he was first elected. Mr English paid tribute to his family and finished his speech by quoting a poem by New Zealand poet James K. Baxter.
These unshaped islands on the Sawyer's bench wait for the chisel of the mind. Mr Speaker, on March the 13th, when I officially resigned, 10,000 days since I was elected, and I'm satisfied that every day I took my turn at the chisel.
Bill English. It's 5 minutes past 5. Sport. Chief Executive Steve Tew says the Black Ferns will benefit after New Zealand Rugby announced a record-breaking profit of more than $33 million in 2017. After the team's success winning the World Cup for the 5th time last year, NZR decided to introduce professional contracts with details yet to be determined. Tew says NZR and the Rugby Players Association will take their time with the groundbreaking agreement.
We've just got to find a way of making sure that any professionalisation of that is sustainable, both for the players and for the organisation, and that's what we're working on at the moment with the NZRPA. We're negotiating with the Players Association. I think the end point of that will be a contract of some shape or form.
Steve Tew. New Zealand squash player and world number 9 Joelle King has lost a 78-minute epic in the final of the World Series in Chicago to world number 3 Noor El Tayeb of Egypt. It was King's first appearance in a World Series final. The Wellington Phoenix coach Dargaville is to pay the price for the club's woeful A-League football season, with the Dutchman to leave after just 1 year in charge. The last-placed Phoenix have already begun looking for new coaches. That's the news.
Winston Peters' privacy case.
Those two are definitely out. We've actually totally settled with them, but that's old news. The other defendants are at large.
Air New Zealand's new safety video.
I still feel it's insensitive and inappropriate. There's still been no closure.
And the Prime Minister's new puppet.
I predicted that you would really play up my eyes.
From the sublime to the absurd. Morning reports with Guy Aspinall and Susie Ferguson, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, the Law Society's outlined plans for reform in the profession as claims of sexual harassment snowball. Is it enough? And after 10, Tara Westover, from an off-the-grid, isolated and uneducated childhood to Cambridge University. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty, mostly cloudy. A few showers more frequent tonight and tomorrow morning. Waikato to Manawatu, including the central high country, mainly fine with high cloud. Isolated afternoon and evening showers possible. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, also Horowhenua, Kapiti and Wellington, fine and warm. Nelson and Bulla, mostly cloudy, a few showers becoming more frequent overnight. Westland, showers today, rain tomorrow with some heavy falls and possible thunderstorms. Marlborough and Canterbury, increasing high cloud, patchy rain spreading from the west tonight and tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, mostly cloudy with scattered rain, isolated thunderstorms possible about Southland and southern Fiordland tomorrow afternoon. The Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. It's exactly 8 past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten. Coming up, Bill English bids farewell to Parliament. But first, yesterday we looked at the growing number of botched earthquake repairs or newly discovered damage to homes that EQC has on its books in Christchurch. We revealed that nearly half of the nearly 3,000 cases it's still dealing with 7 years on from the earthquakes are re-repairs, and almost all of the rest are also in homes that have dealt with EQC previously. Tonight we ask why so many repair jobs managed by EQC do seem to have gone wrong, and why in some cases repairs that should have happened weren't carried out at all. EQC join us shortly, but first here's Conan Young.
The repairs to Jennifer Dalzell's villa in the east of Christchurch were completed soon after the February 2011 earthquake, following an assessment not by a qualified engineer but by 2 builders.
I think they were counting on the fact that if they just patched up the foundations with bog, it would all be fine because there wouldn't be any more earthquakes. But what happened was in June 2011, when we had the next large earthquake, everything just cracked open again and their inadequate repairs were exposed.
Fast forward 3 years to 2014 and a second EQC inspection.
And then the second guys that came, he was a retired headmaster, and they'd just been given these iPads to use to write all the information down, and they couldn't use them. And in the end, they had to get someone to come out from head office to try and help them. And then they all just left because they couldn't figure out how to use their iPads.
After taking EQC to court last year, Miss Dalzell's home was finally inspected by an engineer. After years of wrangling, she was told her house would need to be lifted and her entire foundation rebuilt from scratch. Jennifer Dalzell knew her home's foundations were stuffed soon after the earthquakes. Mike Stewart and Julia McIntyre didn't work out there was a problem until long after they'd bought their home. Like a growing number of Cantabrians, they discovered the home they had bought post-quake that had had all of its EQC managed repairs completed was not as sound as they'd been led to believe.
We went to sell the house, and then when it sold on the first open home, and the person wanted to see our scope of works. So we didn't see a problem with that. We had the completion certificate, so I contacted EQC. They sent us the scope of works, and when we got it, we looked at it and went, uh-oh, I don't think some of this stuff's been done, and the house sale fell through.
This family of 4 had already bought another house, meaning they now have 2 mortgages to pay and no hope of selling their quake-damaged home. Despite identifying the need for substantial foundation repairs, EQC didn't follow through on getting the work done. EQC have now agreed the damage to their home is over its $100,000 cap and that their case is ready to be handed on to their private insurer. The only problem is their insurer says they should have disclosed the unrepaired damage to their property when they took out their policy. And it's now refusing to pay out for the $300,000 cost of getting their home properly fixed. Mike Stewart says they've been left in limbo.
I paid full market price for a house that was fixed by EQC Fletchers, was signed off as fixed. They've admitted that it's their problem. They've said that they'll help us. They won't. We have the reports that say they didn't do the work properly. The work was all identified. It just wasn't done. Just do it.
Julia McIntyre says the strain of having to pay 2 mortgages has been huge and they've now had to put their new house on the market.
We don't want to lose the family home. We've moved the children for the local school. It's having health implications on the entire family, as well as we're having to cancel everything just trying to hold on to our home.
The couple believe their situation is just the tip of the iceberg. In fact, the term onsolds has already been coined in the Canterbury post-quake lexicon to denote people who have bought homes not properly repaired by EQC who don't qualify for a full payout from their private insurer. Their case, and that of 15 others in the onsold category, has been taken on by lawyer Andrew Hooker, who says EQC cannot just walk away from these people.
Currently, EQC says we have no obligations to pay anything outside the Act. We are simply obliged to comply with the Act. We say, no, you don't. Forget about the Act. You owed these people a duty of care. They're now left high and dry, and you should pay whatever it costs to fix these houses.
Mr Hooker says this is a true David and Goliath battle, but one that needs to be fought.
We're in discussions, advanced discussions with a litigation funder from Australia with a view to finding funding for these people because a large proportion of these people can't afford anything.
Andrew Hooker says EQC should now contact everybody in Christchurch that has had a repair managed by Fletcher EQR, all 150,000 of them, and offer to pay for a report by an independent engineer on the true state of their home. Those spoken to today by RNZ are not alone in their concern about the quality of EQC's work. A Facebook posting asking for feedback generated comments from one person who said a retired vacuum cleaner salesperson was sent by EQC to assess their damage, while another was sent a former army negotiator. One person reported an assessor shining a torch under their home between the ventilation grate before declaring their foundations appeared to be fine. A report from an independent assessor found numerous problems with their piles. In Ōtautahi for Checkpoint, ko Konanyang tēnei.
Well, the CEO of EQC is Sid Miller. He's not fronting for interviews. Fletcher Building aren't fronting for interviews. The minister who oversaw the government's response to the Christchurch earthquakes between September 2010 and May 2017 was Jerry Brownlee. He's not fronting for interviews. But EQC did put up their chief customer officer, Trish Keith. I asked her how many claims are currently open.
Well, last year, from the claims that have been recorded through the last year, the ones that we told you that are still open are 2,624.
Peter Wood said on the programme last night there are thousands more to come. Some people simply don't know yet that they will be in the position of coming back to you. Do you think he's right?
I honestly couldn't tell you that.
Can you have a go at estimating the extent to which he's right?
No, I can't, John. No.
You have a lot of material on this, the Auditor General Report 2013, which really did predict all of this and did so on the basis of EQC's own work. 3.3 in that report from October 2013. In our view, there are risks with the way in which EQC has managed repair quality in the program to date. They go on, EQC has identified substandard repairs as a main risk to the home repair program. They go on, one of the main risks that EQC identified for the home repair program was the risk that EQC would be accountable for substandard repair. And in 2013 they say that as at December 2012, quality controls were yet to be fully embedded. December 2012, the earthquake was February 2011. 18 months? No, much closer to 2 years later, you still didn't have quality controls firmly embedded. Is it any surprise so many jobs are returning for a second and third time?
Look, John, that was well before my time, and I absolutely want to reassure you and our listeners and our customers that we will remain here to re-repair homes where it's proven that the damage is caused from the earthquake sequence, and we're committed to doing that.
Martin Weavers, your outgoing chairman, wrote to the Minister last Friday, 6 days ago. I should not have to remind you that repairing houses is not and has never been part of the Earthquake Commission's role. We embarked on that pressing national need from a standing start with no suitably experienced staff, systems, capabilities or partners. What he is saying, what EQC itself was saying, what the Auditor General was saying is that much of the work you did in the first 2 years did not have embedded quality controls, did not have the right people doing it and wasn't good enough.
Yeah, and as I say, John, I wasn't here. I really can't make a comment on that.
No, Trish, I know you can't. And Trish, today, I feel really mean about pointing this out because you have fronted. But we asked for an interview with EQC. Obviously, we were going to discuss these things. I mean, this is an Auditor General report from 2013. We have an IMBI report saying the same things. Why didn't they give us someone, and I'm not being mean to you, but why haven't you put up someone who can talk about what happened in the 2 years after the earthquakes? Surely that is the most material time period of all.
I believe, John, that we are here to put right those repairs, and that's all I can talk to you about, and my commitment to making sure that we do that.
Sid Miller, where is he? What's he doing? Is he in the office? I mean, he's the CEO. He put out a statement which seemed to be in response to the kinds of things Sir Martin Weavers was saying, the kind of comments that Dr. Megan Woods was saying. And he pointed out that around $9 billion in settlements has been paid out to our customers. $9 billion of money, public money. Now, shouldn't he be here talking about this? Shouldn't the person who is giving us this interview be able to talk about what happened in terms of assessments and scopes in the 2 years after the earthquakes? I'm not giving you a hard time, Trish. I really appreciate you fronting, but you're not the right person to be answering these questions. Where is the right person?
I can't answer those. I can't make comment, and you'll have to ask our media people to get in touch with Mr. Miller.
Okay. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I think that we've acknowledged that right on air.
Well, I mean, John, I'm here to make sure that, and I work in the Christchurch office. I'm a Cantabrian, and I'm here to make sure that every customer that can prove that their claim is valid, that it's earthquake damage, we are here to put it right. That's my job.
And I guess the people who are most likely now to discover that things were worse than they had initially believed, and EQC had initially believed, and they initially received compensation for, were people who had cosmetic work done. Because if you had major structural work done, then the structural problems had, in most instances, actually been discovered. And there is a growing school of thought that a lot of people who had structural repairs well below cap actually may have issues beneath their floorboards that they, EQC and their insurer, don't know about. Now, Andrew Hooker says EQC must now call all homeowners who are under cap and organise independent inspections or re-inspections. What do you think about that?
I don't entirely agree with that. The underfloor repair program, which was started with the MB inquiry and became the CEDAR underfloor repair program, has taken into account underfloor repairs and all the repairs that went through the Fletcher's Technical Hub.
That was the MB inquiry that found that roughly a third of the homes that they surveyed, a random survey off the back of some concerns about what was taking place beneath the floorboards in Christchurch, roughly a third, and I'm quoting directly from MB, so this is straight fact, had structural repair work carried out that was non-compliant with the building code. That's
right, and all those repairs were put right. And
well, they were only put right if you knew about them.
No, in addition to that, John, all the repairs that went through the technical hub, which were the underfloor repairs, were also investigated. And for those, the program that became known as CEDAR, run by Fletchers, dealt with all of those. Now, where new underfloor issues are coming to light, we are putting them into our home repair program, or if customers choose and they might not trust us to do their repair, then we are cashing those.
You used the phrase run by Fletchers, and I think that's really material. Are you pursuing Fletchers in any way now? I'm
not going to comment on the Fletchers contract.
I think it's very important, given that $9 billion has been spent in settlements, given that much of this work was led by Fletchers, given that they were the contractor that did more work than any other, that you tell us if you are pursuing them in any way, if there is any form of litigation between EQC and Fletchers.
I can tell you right now that there is no form of litigation. I'm not prepared to comment any further than that.
Why not?
Because I'm not prepared to.
Trish, isn't this material? Isn't this really important? I mean, boy, look, I'm sorry to repeat this. You and everyone know this, but it's 7 years and 1 week since that February earthquake, and we still aren't at a stage of understanding why things aren't quite right.
Well, I think what I can tell you is we did 68,000 repairs. There were 469,000 claims. Of those repairs, there have been a percentage that have come back, and none of them are first-time repairs. So, we talk about waiting 7 years, but not all these repairs have been waiting for 7 years. In fact, only 270-odd claims were lodged before 2016. So, of the ones that we're dealing with at the moment, there is only a very small percentage that have been waiting any longer than 2 years.
Trish Keith, who is the Chief Customer Officer for EQC, we would love to talk to Fletcher Building. Obviously, and we do feel, given how much public money has been involved here, they have an obligation to front for interviews. It's 5:22. The man who abducted a woman and assaulted her at a West Auckland quarry bowed his head and clamped his eyes closed as the jury foreperson responded guilty to the first charge. His head dropped further as guilty verdicts on all charges were returned today in the High Court in Auckland. The Onehunga truck driver who turned 60 today now faces a sentence without end, basically, for the crime. Our reporter Edward Gay has been covering the trial, filing for us on it. Eddie, nice to have you with us in the studio tonight. What can you tell us?
Well, I mean, the victim was present in court today as these verdicts came down, and there were gasps as the guilty verdicts were returned outside the court afterwards. A lot of hugging, a lot of emotion. This young woman was just 23 years old at the time of the attack. She'd been out with friends watching the Gay Pride Parade in Ponsonby, and she was on her way to Karangahape Road around the corner when she became separated from her friends. And coincidentally, she met a stranger, and unbeknownst to her, that man had a rape conviction, and this point was later jumped on by Mitchell's lawyers during the trial, but it was a false lead, and the police were able to rule him out pretty quickly in their investigation. She was stopped from entering a bar later on K Road by bouncers and started making her way home, and the next she knew, a man that police later identified as Mitchell was standing over her wearing a mask and holding what she described as a bat. He was making demands of her to turn around. She refused and scrambled away, and she was eventually able to find a road sign nearby, tell police where she was, and she was 25 kilometres out of town at this quarry in Riverhead.
The evidence she gave was truly horrifying, wasn't it? Yeah. Eddie, I don't know how you sit through this day after day. Footage of a car and a pair of gloves was central to the Crown's case, and I thought the Crown prosecutor was in superb form as she grilled the defendant over the gloves.
Yeah, Kirsten Lummis, she pointed out that investigators immediately began pouring through the CTV footage, the footage captured on these security cameras. They very quickly they had CTV of this, what they believed was a Ford Mondeo entering the quarry and exiting the quarry at the time of the attack. They were also able to link that into a similar car around Great North Road that we know that was where the woman was abducted from. Added to that, of course, were at the scene these gloves, which were later found to have a DNA match to Mitchell, and that's how they caught Mitchell in the end. Mitchell told the court in his defence on the stand that he wasn't the offender, that he had simply tried these gloves on in the warehouse.
And she pointed out they were from a pack of 3, right?
A pack of 3, and that essentially it would have been incredibly bad luck if he was to be believed.
What was the reaction to the verdict, Eddie?
Well, outside court, an advocate spoke on behalf of the victim, and we've actually got her words. We can play those shortly.
Some of you may think that the verdict today would be a cause to celebrate. I couldn't disagree with the statement more. Today is a day to reflect. The fact I came across 2 men in one night who both have sexual assault and abduction convictions is appalling. For each individual with a rape conviction in New Zealand, there are 99 other rape victims where the offender was not caught. In 2014, British medical journal The Lancet published a report indicating sexual assault rates. Out of 56 countries, New Zealand had the 3rd highest rate, more than double the world average. As important as addressing the causes of climate change, we need to ensure New Zealand is a place that we actually want our children, brothers, sisters and friends to grow up in. I will be forever grateful to the New Zealand Police, Help Sexual Abuse Foundation, Kirsten Lummis and her team, as well as my friends, family and other survivors who have given me the courage to stand tall today. Thank you.
That was an advocate speaking on behalf of the victim. Now, Mitchell will be sentenced in May at the High Court in Auckland. The Crown Prosecutor, Kirsten Lummis, she's already indicated to the judge today that she will be looking for a sentence of preventive detention, and that essentially means that in order for Mitchell to get out of prison, he'll have to prove that he's no longer a threat to society.
Edward Gay, who has covered the case throughout. Thank you so much, Eddie. We really appreciate it. Residents of the remote eastern Taranaki settlement of Mato say they feel like the forgotten victims of former Cyclone Geeta. The village's 40-odd properties have been without power for about 10 days. At times, the phone service has been down too. Sheep and beef farmer Shane Rawlinson told our reporter Robin Martin the people of Mato are a resourceful bunch, but they're beginning to get a bit fed up.
Most have sort of acquired a generator of some sort that runs maybe a bare essential, like a fridge or a freezer, or, you know, obviously not many have the availability of a big one, so you can only run just what you absolutely have to. I mean, because we're, farming as well, so we're actually running business-like stuff, so you've got freezers for dog food and what have you. Well, it's just not happening. That has to be thrown away or fed out, and likewise for running your shearing plants and what have you, people just dealing with whatever they can with what they can.
And what's Powerco saying about what the problem has been?
Well, the problem is pine trees. So basically, our line that comes through pine trees. They've been planted under or right beside the lines, and they basically every time we get a weather storm, they take the lines out. I guess our issue would be that, our power went out Tuesday, 10 days ago, whatever day that was, and they actually didn't start on our job on here until the Monday just gone. So it had been a week before anyone even actually approached the job. And from there, they actually didn't even have access, because it's owned by a syndicate of farmers who don't live in the area. They obviously don't want their trees cut down, so then they don't allow Powerco in, or at least that's what Powerco is telling us, without payment, even though they do have an easement through there. So as of Monday, they hadn't even started on the job.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what's frustrating is if something is seriously taken out, you only got a certain amount of people on board, well, that's fine, but if we've gone 6 or 7 days and no one's even there, and then trying to get request access in there, that to me is an issue.
So do you feel like you've been well looked after?
Well, are we looked after? No, I reckon we're getting let down by a lot of people, really. I'm not specifically saying Powerco. For me, the trees. I mean, I've lived here all my life. I was actually born here, and through all my childhood, we couldn't lose our power for more than 2 days maximum. Now we'd probably lose our power probably once a year or could easily lose it for 4 or 5 days. This has been the longest we've ever lost it, but it's not a real infrequent occurrence for us to lose power. So it would be great if someone could actually do something about it, but no one seems to actually want to take charge or even sort of, they don't tend to let go what's actually happening most of the time.
And Lines company Powerco says fallen trees caused interruption to the power supply at Mato. It says it first had to restore supply leading into Mato, and since that was done earlier this week, about 70 workers have been in the area. Powerco says it hopes to restore power to the community tonight, and generators will be supplied to those still without electricity. Coming up on Checkpoint, former Prime Minister Bill English gives his valedictory speech. Should Auckland schools stagger their start times to help ease traffic congestion, which was particularly egregious this morning, even by Auckland standards? Mayor Phil Goff says it could be one solution. And the White House's revolving door continues to spin. Long-serving Trump aide Hope Hicks resigns from her job as communications director. She was regarded as very close to the president. We'd love your feedback. Don't forget you can text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook Checkpoint with John Campbell, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Business next, then some weather, then Bill English, but before it all, Katrina Batten.
The government is warning mergers might be needed to secure the future of cash-strapped polytechnics. It's axed the competitive funding system whereby millions of dollars in subsidies have been transferred from polytechnics to private tertiary institutions. But it predicts that most institutes of technology and polytechnics will be making deficits within 5 years because of falling enrolments. Colin Jack Mitchell has been found guilty of kidnapping and assaulting a woman with intent to sexually violate her. The Crown has indicated they'll be seeking a sentence of preventive detention. A spokesperson for the victim of the Riverhead Quarry attack says today's guilty verdicts are not a cause to celebrate but a day to reflect. All 6 of the country's university law schools have cut ties with the law firm Russell McVeigh because of serious allegations of sexual misconduct. Auckland University is the most recent to do so, saying Russell McVeigh should have made a much stronger apology and publicly recognised the harm that some women law students have experienced. A Christchurch resident says she's not surprised to hear about a rising number of botched repairs or missed quake damage being reported to the Earthquake Commission. Jennifer Dalzell took EQC to court after 2 rounds of bad repairs. She says the organisation has done a terrible job in Christchurch. Post-quake research has found that teachers were among the worst sufferers of post-traumatic stress in the 18 months after the Christchurch earthquakes in 2011. They consistently reported high levels of emotional exhaustion, anxiety and social dysfunction. The former Prime Minister and National Leader Bill English made jokes, tugged on heartstrings and quoted James K. Baxter during his valedictory speech in Parliament this afternoon. The 56-year-old MP from Dipton officially closed his 27-year career in the House by paying tribute to his family and colleagues and referring to the Baxter poem about chiselling unshaped islands. He says he's satisfied he took his turn at the chisel every day. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6.
Yes, we'll have more from Bill English coming up on the programme. Let's turn to business news now with Jonathan Mitchell. And Jono, are you there?
Hi, John.
Hi, nice to see you. Our purchasing power with the rest of the world has improved, I understand. What does that mean?
That's right. Well, we had a strong terms of trade in the December quarter, so our export prices are rising faster than our import prices. So we're getting better returns for things like lamb and butter, along with forestry and wool. This marks a record result for the December quarter, beating September's result. The pick is that the terms of trade will continue to stay strong, so we're getting good returns expected for our primary export. There's strong global demand and consumer appetite for New Zealand products. That's against a backdrop, though, of relatively low global inflation.
Right. I think I'm slightly wiser. Another scattering of company results. What were the highlights, Jono?
Oh, New Zealand King Salmon was one, John. They had a first half profit. It was up on last year, around $16 million, but they've warned in the second half that warmer seas will lead to lower fish stocks, so you might see the premium product New Zealand King Salmon cost a bit more in the supermarket over the coming weeks and months. Then we had Methven, they're the tap maker. They've been a bit mixed lately, but they had a fairly flat profit in their first half, around $3 million. Its sales were higher and they managed to reduce a bit of debt as well. So they're relaunching a few products to get those sales up here and around the world. So we're pretty much through all the companies, John. A few retailers to come, such as Hallenstein Glasson, Kathmandu and Briscoe Group. At the end of this month, we'll also hear from Fonterra, putting their result on the table. Expect to see their revenue higher, around $10 billion, but a fairly flat profit as well from them expected.
That'll be a fascinating result. Yeah, thanks, Jono. What happened on the markets today?
We had a slightly weaker day on the top 50 index, down 31 points to trade at 8,343. The dollar was mixed as well. It's trading at 72 US cents and 93.1 Australian.
Jonathan Mitchell, 1/3 of our small but excellent business team. Thanks, Jono. Let's go to weather now with Met Service meteorologist just up the hill from Jono, really. Kia ora, John.
Kia ora. As we head in towards the weekend, it is looking like we've got more cloudy and pretty humid air with us. For Friday across the likes of Auckland, we're going to keep a fair bit of cloud and that humid air as well. Minimum temperatures as we go through towards the start of the day, 19 degrees Celsius. A few showers to watch out for, and our daytime highs in Auckland about 24 degrees Celsius. It's a very similar story across those northern and western parts of the North Line. We'll find more cloud, still very humid. Our nighttime temperatures in, say, Hamilton down to about 20 degrees Celsius. More cloud and a few showers to watch out for there. Some drier weather though down towards Wellington, and not a bad looking day. Again, pretty mild, 17 to about 23 degrees Celsius as we go through the daytime, and generally staying dry. Not just at Wellington, but also up in towards Palmerston North, right the way up that eastern coast as well. Might catch an isolated shower in Whanganui, but highs here 25 degrees Celsius. Heading down towards the South Island, not a bad day in Canterbury. There will be more high clouds that feeds across us as we go through towards the afternoon, perhaps bringing an odd spot of rain. But for the best spot to be, it's probably up towards the likes of, say, Blenheim, set to stay dry through the daytime. Highs still around about 24 degrees Celsius. Elsewhere, there's some wetter weather pushing it back on towards that western coast, and could be one or two heavier falls to watch out for. And we're also going to find that wetter weather feeding across in towards Southland, Otago, and those southern parts of Canterbury as well. That's it from me.
Thank you very much indeed, John. And that's it from Bill English too. The 56-year-old farmer from Dipton has officially signed off with a final valedictory speech, emotional speech in Parliament, where he spoke about his 27-year career. Remember, he arrived as a young MP in 1990. Today was his last day. With more, here's our political reporter, May Heron.
At least he's retained more of his hair than I have.
I want to know, did you take your chair with you?
Sure enough, behind Bill English's old desk sat a faded pink chair that looked pretty small and very ordinary. As Mr. English laughed with his old colleagues, it became apparent the time was coming to say goodbye.
Well, you're never quite ready to go, are you?
In his old office, now the new digs of his successor, Simon Bridges, Bill English couldn't help but take a jab at his old friend, Nelson MP Nick Smith.
This is the official handover.
Yeah.
You now become father of the house.
Congratulations! Does that mean people will finally respect me? Yeah, they will.
The two MPs have been in Parliament for 27 years, something Bill English reflected on in his valedictory speech.
The library tells me I've spoken 1,000 times in the House, answered or asked 2,000 questions and answers. I suspect probably about 10,000 interjections, 23 of which were witty.
Though now one of the old hands, once upon a time he was the new kid on the block. Here he is speaking to RNZ as a fresh-faced MP for Wallace in 1990.
There's nothing particularly special about the way this process goes on, and nothing particularly unusual. I think most people you'll find in politics have an incurable addiction to it and have had for a long time, and I'm certainly one of those.
That addiction has kept him going in Parliament. Nick Smith started with him back then and was part of a group known as the Brat Pack.
It feels strange. There were 30 new members of Parliament elected with myself and Bill. To be the last one sort of feels like the passage of history.
The up and downs for Bill English were more pronounced than for most MPs. As a young politician, he rocketed up the National Party ranks. He was the Health Minister, Finance Minister and Treasurer before the government, headed by Jenny Shipley, was voted out in 1999. He then led a coup against Mrs Shipley, rolling her to become National Party leader. But for Bill English, it turned into a political move which backfired badly. He led National to its worst defeat ever in the 2002 election.
Today, this is the verdict of the voter. We accept that verdict on the leader of the party. I've got the responsibility of dealing with the consequences of it.
That election defeat was foreshadowed by a bruising charity boxing match where he suffered a bloody nose. At his goodbye speech today, he recalled a story of how eager his coach was to fight him.
And I said to him one day, Chris, why are you so keen to get in the ring? And he said, mate, it's because you're a Tory and I want to hit you. The composure that I led under the tutelage of this hardcore Labour supporter about how to stay composed while you're taking the punches made all the difference to the capacity to lead my party through a very difficult period.
Bill English did get up to fight again. When up-and-coming rookie John Key took over in 2008, he formed a successful partnership, becoming Finance Minister and Loyal Deputy, before taking over in 2016. He then fought a hard election campaign, where he secured 44% of the vote, much to the surprise of many analysts. But tonight, he leaves all the wins and all the losses behind as he leaves Parliament. Bill English fought back tears as he spoke his final words in the House, which has arguably become a second home.
Quote from James K. Baxter, which I've always liked. It's from his poem called New Zealand, where the first line is, these unshaped islands on the Sawyer's bench wait for the chisel of the mind. Mr. Speaker, on March the 13th, when I officially resign, on March the 13th it will be 10,000 days since I was elected. And I'm satisfied that every day I took my turn at the chisel.
Atu iti whare parimata mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko mai herein aho.
17 minutes to 6. The White House's revolving door continues to spin. The latest departure is long-serving Trump aide Hope Hicks, who's resigning from her job as communications director. She's been caught up in a scandal involving a White House staffer and yesterday appeared before the House Intelligence Committee as part of the investigation into Russian interference in the presidential election. Her departure, according to Washington insiders, represents a big blow for the president, his family and White House staff. CNN's Randy Kay has more.
I'm 28 years old and I am the press secretary for the Donald J. Trump for President campaign.
It was a swift rise for Hope Hicks, who went from modeling and acting early on to handling PR for Ivanka Trump's fashion line after college. By 2014, Hicks was managing communications for the Trump Organization, and soon her job would change again.
She used to be in my real estate company. I said, "What do you know about politics?" She said, "Absolutely nothing." I say, "Congratulations, you're into the world of politics, right?"
Hicks told New York Magazine, Mr. Trump looked at me and said, "I'm thinking about running for president, and you're going to be my press secretary." During the campaign, Hicks reportedly had a note from candidate Trump above her desk that read simply, "Hopi, you're the greatest."
Hope, get up here. She's always on the phone talking to the reporters. trying to get the reporters to straighten out their dishonest stories.
Hicks had zero political experience, yet she was almost always by Donald Trump's side. Through it all, her voice rarely heard in public. She didn't even release a statement after a very public screaming match with former campaign manager Quarry Lewandowski. And at this campaign event in Alabama, she seemed hesitant even to just say a few words.
Hi! Merry Christmas, everyone! And thank you, Donald Trump!
With her position in the White House, Hicks gained access to the world stage. Her access to the president put her at the center of several key investigations, too. On Russia, she's been interviewed by Special Prosecutor Robert Mueller's team multiple times. Just yesterday, she was in front of the House Intelligence Committee answering questions for about 8 hours, admitting that sometimes she was required to tell white lies in the Trump administration, but insisting she never lied about substantive matters.
So much stuff goes through her as the conduit between outsiders and the president that she really sits in a particularly important seat for Mueller.
And Hicks was also involved in the aftermath of Don Jr.'s meeting with the Russian lawyer at Trump Tower last year. On board Air Force One, helping craft the now infamous press release, claiming the meeting was about adoption. We've since learned it was really about dirt on Hillary Clinton. Hope Hicks also helped craft the initial White House response to allegations of domestic abuse by now former top aide Rob Porter, with whom she was romantically involved. Porter denied the allegations and resigned. Now the woman who rarely says a word in public will be taking her silence with her as she departs the White House.
Randy Kay reporting 14 minutes to 6. Mergers aren't being ruled out as a way of resolving the crisis confronting the nation's 16 polytechs and institutes of technology. The government says the institutions are struggling with falling enrolments, and if things don't change, most will be making deficits within 5 years. Yesterday, the Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, announced a $33 million bailout for the West Coast Taipōtini Polytechnic, and today he met Polytechnic bosses to discuss solutions. Here's our education correspondent, John Gerritsen.
The grim outlook for polytechnics and institutes of technology was at the top of the agenda at today's meeting. The Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, says everybody there agrees things need to change.
We've got a number of polytechs who are already in financial strife and others who are looking to the future and seeing that that will probably be them if things don't change. So there is a mood for change. We've been very clear that we're not going into this with a set agenda, but clearly the status quo is not an option.
Chris Hipkins says the system is fragmented, and with a few structural changes, the existing pot of money could be made to go a lot further. It's not clear if those changes will include mergers, but Mr Hipkins doesn't rule them out.
Having 16 autonomous institutions clearly is resulting in a huge overhead cost that perhaps isn't the most efficient and effective way of organising things. So, look, I'm taking a fairly open approach to that discussion. It might be that mergers are involved, or it might be that an entirely different way of operating is decided for the future.
One of the meeting's co-hosts, Gus Gilmore from Manukau Institute of Technology, says the institutes could work more closely together.
We think we need to change. We think there are areas of duplication. For example, program development. 3,000 odd new programs developed in the last 12 months through the ITP sector approximately. Is that too many? Sounds like a few too many. I think there are areas for efficiency improvements.
However, Gus Gilmore says funding is also a problem.
The ITP sector in 2016 for funding in 17 and 18 lost upwards of $20 million. $20 million injected back into this sector right now would make a big difference.
Gus Gilmore says the drop was due to falling enrolments, but also a system that awards funding for low-level courses to the most competitive bidder. That's moved millions of dollars in subsidies from Crown-owned polytechnics to private tertiary institutes over the past 5 years, and today the government announced it's axing the system. Whether the money will shift back to institutes of technology remains to be seen, and Craig Musson from Independent Education New Zealand says private institutions will be looking out for that.
That's always a concern. We hope to be part of the consultation that's going to happen around this, but the PTE sector, especially around the agriculture, horticulture, viticulture section, are well entrenched in the training and have the facilities, and in general we're doing a very, very good job.
Meanwhile, the government says it's looking for a long-term solution so polytechnics aren't at risk of failing when their enrolments drop. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerritsen aho.
10.5 minutes to 6. New Zealand rugby boss Steve Chu says potential future All Blacks being plundered by overseas clubs as teenagers. He's warning that Kiwi union and league players as young as 15 are being targeted in what he describes as an unprecedented threat to the country's playing stocks. This is the kind of stuff, of course, that Samoa, Tonga and Fiji have been saying for a long time, often about New Zealand schools, funnily enough. And as rugby reporter Joe Porter discovered, it's not just men who are being targeted.
McLeod with the tackle, the strip, the offload, and now Polytechnic, the captain, his ankle tip, looking for his younger brother, Isaiah Polytechnic, back on the inside for Angus Gray, a return ball for Polytechnic, what a try!
New Zealand schoolboy rugby competitions have been the happy hunting grounds of Australia's National Rugby League clubs for many years, but New Zealand Rugby Chief Executive Steve Chu says others are now entering the race to sign the country's most talented teenagers.
Scouts from a range of codes, not just rugby in Europe, but we've seen the American football codes have a look around, and the NRL's pretty busy over here as well. So it's got to make sure that we're not getting to the point where children and their parents are forced to make decisions too early when they don't really understand the consequences.
Player agent Simon Porter says league clubs have been snapping up young players for over a decade, and while he hasn't seen any 15-year-olds being signed by overseas rugby clubs, he says it's trending that way.
You'd be amazed at how many young men have already committed their futures to Australian rugby league clubs at the age of 15 or 16. But not so much rugby union. There's definitely a shift to go younger. Probably not schoolboy kids, although it has happened, but the interest is getting younger and younger. It's absolutely bang on.
And with players having to be based in Aotearoa to play for the All Blacks, Porter can see why non-international New Zealanders are in such demand.
There's no doubt that clubs are realising that if they get somebody like a James Lowe or someone like that, they'll get the 5 best years of his career, where he's not worried about international rugby. He's not going away on a national break. They get the best out of them. That's why New Zealand rugby players are so expensive or so desired.
Porter says while lawyers will debate the legality of contracts signed by 15-year-olds, in his opinion, it's unethical.
I personally don't think kids 15 should be signing anything. And union teams, they put money into guys through development and stuff. They're just not signing guys that young, and nor should they, to be fair.
However, Kelston Boys High School's sport and business manager, the former Warriors and Kiwis rugby league star Dwayne Mann, says rugby players and athletes as young as 11 are already being scouted by sports schools around the country.
First assistant coaches and directors of sports will often be at the Ames game, which is a year 7 and 8 intermediate, so it's the biggest sporting game at that age group in Australasia. To see the next big 11, 12-year-old and offering them scholarships to come to their particular school. So when people sort of are getting upset about 15-year-old signing, well, it's happening actually a bit younger than that.
Mann says there's evidence of Japanese teams scouting at Auckland First 15 games. Simon Porter doubts 15-year-olds are being approached by Japanese clubs, but he says school leavers certainly are.
Japan have completely changed their overseas player structure to focus on attracting uncapped players who can become eligible for Japan.
And it's not just the men's game being raided.
It was something like already this year, 18 girls have gone to American universities, which when you think about the player base of rugby in the women's space, that's a massive number of talented individuals leaving the country when the player base is pretty small already.
Steve Chu is exploring the possibility of opening relationships with certain foreign clubs where New Zealand rugby would send players for sabbaticals. New Zealand rugby is facing an increasing array of threats to its player pool, and how it adapts will likely have a direct influence on how the All Blacks perform. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Joe Porter aho.
It's a fascinating issue, that one. This is a bewildering story. The Philippines ambassador to New Zealand says an American donut chain has caused great offence by banning non-New Zealand residents from its official opening competition. At least 4 customers were turned away from the opening of Krispy Kreme on Wednesday morning, including Filipino citizen Ivy, who travelled from Hamilton with her New Zealand boyfriend Chris Smith. Now, the Philippines ambassador to this country, Jesus Domingo, says New Zealand is home to 50,000 Filipinos, and he's appalled. Ivy was quite explicitly told by a security guard she was a foreigner and she had to go away.
I'd like to ask the employers, did you really think this promotional activity through? And I'd like to know if they condone the action of their security guard, and then why are they, instead of apologizing and perhaps making some. And this lady, I think, drove for the boyfriend several hours from Hamilton, I believe, or far out. Some kind of restitution and apology.
Jesus Domingo. Now, the promotion included a year's free donuts for the first person in the queue, but from then on it was just a free box of donuts and a T-shirt for the next 100 customers. It seems a strange thing to have nationality protections around. Chris and Ivy drove from Hamilton, arriving at 2:30 a.m, 5 hours ahead of the opening, to take their place as 75th and 76th in the queue.
We came up to the queue and there was a security guy at the queue, and we asked the security guy asked for our ID as well as our phone number and name. So we gave him mine first, and that said that was fine. And then he did Ivy's, and Ivy only had just her passport. So she handed him the passport, and he said, "Oh, are you a citizen or residency in New Zealand?" And she said, "No, not residency or citizenship. I'm just a visitor." And then he said, "Oh, you got to go. You cannot even be here. You can't even be waiting in line with me. You can't even be in the property itself."
So what happened then? Was Ivy actually asked to leave? She couldn't even... So you were eligible for whatever prize you were going to get, which is a small number of free donuts and a T-shirt or something, but Ivy wasn't allowed to stand beside you while you queued for that.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, Ivy wasn't allowed to stand beside me at all. She had to go back to her car and waited, but we both agreed. It was fine because I asked, "Oh, do you want me to go with you and leave and then go back to Hamilton?" But she said, "No, we want the free donuts. I just wait in the car." So she was willing to wait in the car.
And how long did she wait in the car for?
For 4 to 5 hours.
And she wasn't able to come and just simply stand beside you, talk to you, be your companion?
No, not at all.
Were other people being asked to leave in these circumstances, Chris, that you observed?
Yeah, there was 2 other people. One was this guy that was from America but citizenship in New Zealand and only had an American passport. He even got told to leave as well. And there's this other lady, I forgot her, and just asked to leave.
So what do you make of all of this, Chris?
I think it was outrageous. I do understand about the first 3 people because there's like the 12-month donuts, 6 months and 3 months. I do understand that, but I do not understand the rest of it because the rest of the prize was to get a box of donuts as well as a T-shirt with the number of because I was 75 in line, so I got number 75.
Has Ivy ever experienced anything like this before, Chris?
No, not at all. I feel like it's the first time. I feel like she's upset about it. She's disappointed, and she locked herself in a room and I want to talk to the media about it. Yeah.
Have you gone to Krispy Kreme? Have you called head office and tried to talk to anyone there about this?
I talked to Krispy Kreme at the event itself, the CEO, and he apologized to me. And then what happened was he told me to apologize to my girlfriend. And then I went to my girlfriend and apologized for Krispy Kreme on their behalf. And then I just got a call just not long ago, and they said that he apologized sincerely again, and they're going to give me a couple of goodies and stuff like that sent on the mail coming soon. So I think it could be quite a positive result. We'll just see what happens.
In a statement, Krispy Kreme says it's disappointed to have caused upset. It says its terms and conditions stipulate only residents of the country a competition is running it can take part. This is a donut competition, for goodness sake, Krispy Kreme. It says it now understands New Zealand has a wonderful and diverse population. It now understands that, and in hindsight it was a lapse in judgment to enforce its standard terms and conditions. I'm just going to breathe in and out, for goodness sake. We're getting a lot of feedback tonight, a lot of feedback on that interview with Trish Keith. People pretty upset that EQC put her up, actually. Well, we were too. We do think that the CEO of EQC should have fronted. this is a really important issue. But equally, we can't allow public organisations that are spending public money to simply not front. So when Trish Keith was put up on behalf of EQC, we had to interview her, but it was clearly apparent that she didn't know much of what we were talking about, particularly in the period between 2011 and 2013, when many of these assessments were taking place. Sid Miller, you are the CEO of EQC. You should front. People saying, shame on EQC putting up someone who couldn't respond to such critical questions, such a disgrace. Interviewee from EQC says she's there to make sure that all outstanding claims are addressed. How? By finally handing them on to an insurer who might legitimately say, hey, that's not our problem. Lots of people pretty upset about this. Phil Goff on Auckland traffic after the news and staggering school start times.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. A Christchurch resident says she's not surprised to hear about a rising number of botched repairs or missed quake damage being reported to the Earthquake Commission. It's been revealed half of the nearly 3,000 cases EQC is still dealing with 7 years on from the earthquakes are re-repairs. The repairs to Jennifer Dalzell's villa were completed soon after the February 2011 earthquake, following an assessment, but not by a qualified engineer, but by two builders.
I think they were counting on the fact that if they just patched up the foundations with bog, it would all be fine because there wouldn't be any more earthquakes. But what happened was in June 2011, when we had the next large earthquake, everything just cracked open again and their inadequate repairs were exposed.
Jennifer Dalzell was subjected to a second botched repair before taking EQC to court and says the organisation has done a terrible job in Christchurch. The Earthquake Commission's Chief Customer Officer, Trish Keith, says the organisation is committed to fixing any re-repairs or reaching a settlement with any homeowner who can prove their property was damaged by the earthquakes. The EQC Chief Executive Sid Miller refused to be interviewed. Post-quake research has found that teachers were among the worst sufferers of post-traumatic stress in the 18 months after the Christchurch earthquakes in 2011. Otago University's lead researcher, David McBride, says out of the 226 people surveyed, teachers consistently reported high levels of emotional exhaustion, anxiety and social dysfunction. Mr McBride says members of the police, fire and ambulance services, healthcare workers and the Red Cross workers were also included in the survey. Residents of the remote eastern Taranaki settlement of Mātou say they feel like the forgotten victims of the Cyclone Geeta storm. The village's 40-odd properties have been without power for about 10 days, and at times the phone service has also been down. Sheep and beef farmer Shane Rawlinson says people are getting fed up.
So our power went out Tuesday 10 days ago, and they actually didn't start on our job till Monday just gone. So it had been a week before anyone even actually approached the job.
Mr Rawlinson says most residents are using generators to power the bare essentials. Lines company Powerco says it initially had to restore the supply leading to Mātou. It says since that was done earlier this week, about 70 workers have been in the area. Powerco hopes to restore power in Mātou tonight. The Education Minister Chris Hipkins is not ruling out mergers as a way of strengthening the Polytechnic sector. The Minister today met Polytechnic leaders to discuss changes that will protect the sector from the impact of falling enrolments. Current forecasts suggest most institutes will be making deficits within 5 years, and Mr Hipkins says greater cooperation might be needed.
Having 16 autonomous institutions clearly is resulting in a huge overhead cost that perhaps isn't the most efficient and effective way of organising things. So, look, I'm taking a fairly open approach to that discussion. It might be that mergers are involved, or it might be that an entirely different way of operating is decided for the future.
Chris Hipkins says leaving the current system unchanged is not an option. The American President Donald Trump has told a group of politicians not to be so petrified of the powerful gun lobby, the National Rifle Association. During a bipartisan summit on gun safety, Mr Trump urged the group to come up with a comprehensive bill on gun reform in the wake of last month's Florida school shooting. He suggested expanding background checks for gun buyers and raising the legal age to buy rifles from 21 from 18. Mr Trump says it's time an American president stepped up.
We're determined to turn our grief into action. I really believe that. I think that the people at this table want it. I mean, I see some folks that don't say nice things about me, and that's okay. because if you turn that into this energy, I'll love you.
Donald Trump. Meanwhile, two major American retailers, Dick's Sporting Goods and Walmart, say they'll no longer sell firearms to anyone under 21 years of age. The former Prime Minister Bill English has delivered a passionate goodbye speech in Parliament, reflecting on his 27-year political career. The 56-year-old, who hails from Dipton in Southland, officially signed off this afternoon, 2 weeks after he announced he was quitting politics. Mr English told MPs he's thankful for the opportunities he's had and the many people he's served with. He recalled the highs and lows of his long time in Parliament.
The library tells me I've spoken 1,000 times in the House, answered or asked 2,000 questions and answers. I suspect probably about 10,000 interjections, 23 of which were witty.
Bill English says he's looking forward to living life without a diary. It's 6:05. Sport and New Zealand women's rugby players are set to get professional contracts for the first time after Chief Executive Steve Tew announced a record-breaking profit of $33.4 million for New Zealand rugby in 2017. The Black Ferns won the World Cup for the 5th time last year, and NZR will now introduce paid contracts for the women, with details yet to be confirmed. The Crusaders have lost All Black open side Matt Todd for Saturday's clash with the Stormers in Christchurch and up to 6 weeks of the Super Rugby season due to a broken thumb. The news is better for the New Zealand cricketers though, with captain Kane Williamson and batsman Ross Taylor expected to be fit to play England in Saturday's third one-dayer in Wellington. The national track cycling sprint coach Anthony Peden says they have to put a disappointing first day at the World Championships in the Netherlands behind them. The men's sprint team were far from their best and were unable to defend their title, failing to make the medal round.
I don't think it's anything to do with their form. We came here prepared to defend our world title, and the boys got full belief that they were capable of doing that. And we also came to kick on in competition for the next couple of days, and that's what we've got to do, is turn it around tomorrow, reset, and really show what we're capable of.
Anthony Peden, the women's sprint team, were 5th. The American Daniel Nisbet and Australian Jaron Todd have a one-shot lead nearing the end of the first round of the New Zealand Golf Open in Queenstown. Harry Bateman is the best-placed New Zealander, 2 shots off the pace. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, our changing world meets the dogs being trained to sniff out the koi carp plaguing Waikato's waterways. We look at the upsides and downsides of lead. And Will Flockton is on the line from Brighton, where they are dealing with the twin terrors of a KFC shutdown and the Siberian airflow known as the Beast from the east. All coming up after the news at 7.
And at 10, we're live and we'll be keeping you up to date with the world, talking to some of the people who have made the news or who are just worth talking to. That's Lately with Karen Hay, on Nights with Brian Crump on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty, mostly cloudy, a few showers, more frequent tonight and tomorrow morning. Waikato to Manawatu, including the central high country, mainly fine with high cloud. Isolated afternoon and evening showers possible. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, also Horowhenua, Kapiti and Wellington, fine and warm. Nelson and Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, mostly cloudy, a few showers becoming more frequent overnight. It's Thursday, John. Westland, showers today, rain tomorrow with some heavy falls and possible thunderstorms. Marlborough and Canterbury, increasing high cloud, patchy rain spreading from the west tonight and tomorrow. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, mostly cloudy with scattered rain, isolated thunderstorms possible about Southland and southern Fiordland tomorrow afternoon, and the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint with John Campbell.
And Katrina Batten. Thanks so much, Katrina. We appreciate it. So much feedback coming on EQC. If you are contacting us about your personal experiences, we will get back in touch with you. Thank you. Let's go from Christchurch to Auckland, where the traffic is so bad and the outlook so dire. Mayor Phil Goff says every potential fix is an option, including ideas like staggering school start times in the morning. Mr Goff was responding to new data out today that shows the average Aucklander spends nearly 80 hours a year in traffic on motorways. That doesn't include normal roads. 80 hours, what's that, 2 working weeks? New transport infrastructure and optimisations I'm sorry for using that word, to the existing network are obviously Mr Goff's two key approaches, but he says he's open to looking into any alternative fix that could help reduce traffic. People are already saying, hey, what about public transport? Zach Fleming has more.
Two things are certain in Auckland in 2018. The sun will rise and peak traffic will be borderline unbearable.
Anywhere between 40 minutes and an hour, depending on what's going on, for about 8 k's.
That's from Meadowbank, East Auckland, a 15-minute drive without traffic. The average Aucklander, according to the AA, now spends 78 hours a year, or more than half an hour each working day, sitting in traffic on a motorway.
What it highlights is the pressure that the Auckland Transport Network is under.
And it's not just on the motorway where Aucklanders waste time sitting in traffic. It's also before they even get to the motorway as well. At the Union Street Wellington Street on-ramp in central Auckland, just before 11 o'clock, so well past rush hour, we timed how long it took a minivan to travel 300 metres to get onto the motorway. And it took them 10 minutes and 40 seconds. 11 a.m, 10 minutes to travel 300 metres to get onto the motorway. Barney Irvine from the AA says it's only going to get worse.
Increasing population, 43,000 person increase last year, 40,000 new cars on the road, and Aucklanders are driving much more as well. It's pretty clear that the pressure isn't going to come off anytime soon.
In Glendine, West Auckland, when Naresh drives to the city at weekends, it takes
20 minutes.
And on a Tuesday morning?
55 minutes to an hour. I leave around 7 and sometimes 8 or sometimes 8:15, so definitely an hour minimum.
And Michelle from Murray's Bay on the North Shore?
On a weekend or anything, it's about 15 minutes. Otherwise, it can be an hour, hour and a half.
So traffic, on average, quadruples Aucklanders' commutes. Auckland Mayor Phil Goff wasn't at all surprised by the report.
For years, we have underinvested in that infrastructure, and today we're paying the price. We're paying the price in lost productivity, which they estimate at $1 to $2 billion a year, and individually we're paying the price because we're spending hours in our car. I leave now for work before 6 in the morning and go home generally after 6:30 at night, so I don't spend 3 hours a day, literally, in my car or on my motorbike.
And it's making kids late for school. Auckland Girls Grammar Principal Nairi Ashmore says 70% of her students come from out of zone. She says Auckland Transport isn't doing enough to help them.
They certainly have to get round the table and start talking to the transport providers to ensure that there isn't ongoing disruption.
The Waterview Tunnel shaved an average of 7 minutes off most peak trips, but it took 4 years and $1.4 billion to build. The AA says there are several smaller initiatives Auckland needs to start now.
More park and ride to help bring down those barriers to public transport usage, and we also want to see firm congestion targets set for Auckland that are reported on regularly and very publicly to let people know how we're tracking.
It also wants to see a congestion charge trial. Workplaces can do their bit by encouraging flexible work hours, and Auckland Mayor Phil Goff says it's even worth investigating whether schools could have staggered start times too.
Do we need to look at every alternative option? I think we do, because we have road congestion at a state that even with the investment, which we're planning, of another $27 billion spent on transport over the next decade, we're going to have to just run fast to stand still in terms of congestion when you're adding 800 extra cars a week to the roads.
So basically, Auckland's traffic is either going to stay as bad as it is now or get worse. And Aucklanders, your options are don't drive or deal with it. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
A dire shortage of travellers picking up seasonal work is threatening to derail the harvest of apples, kiwi fruit and grapes around the country. And it's prompting calls for the government to allow more short-term workers from the Pacific to work here, especially as even more fruit is expected to be picked next year. Anusha Bradley has more.
It's hot, hard work, and at $35 a bin, apple pickers have to get busy to earn a decent crust. Apple growers top up wages to ensure pickers are paid the minimum wage for a day's work, but anyone not pulling their weight may not have a job for long. But it seems backpackers no longer have an appetite for this kind of work.
They're a little bit more
I guess, cautious of the jobs that they're choosing.
That's Mary Tolley. She's the chairperson of the Backpacker Youth and Adventure Tourism Association. She says travellers are more wary of schemes like working for accommodation, where they can toil for 12 hours a day for a night's accommodation. She says many backpackers simply want more money.
They're not coming through with a lot of disposable income these days, especially our backpacker market. So they are looking for jobs that are paying more, and maybe the fruit picking's not, in that threshold in terms of what they consider to be good pay.
The Chief Executive of New Zealand Kiwi Fruit Growers, Nikki Johnston, says she's very concerned there won't be enough backpackers to help with the harvest, with a record crop expected at the end of the month. She says higher wages might have to be on the cards.
That's one of a number of different strategies that we're looking at. We're undertaking quite a lot of work in terms of both the short-term labour shortage and also a long-term strategy as the kiwi fruit industry looks to effectively double in size. Labour constraints are probably our biggest concern.
The Chief Executive of New Zealand Wine Growers, Philip Gregan, says grape growers also have serious concerns about fewer backpackers for the upcoming harvest and pruning seasons.
For us to produce quality grapes, we need to have well-pruned vines. That's the period that certainly we are very concerned about at this stage.
There is a bit of time, I guess, to try and recruit some people. Are you planning any recruitment exercise or campaign?
Well, the discussions that are being had exactly at the moment about what we can do to make sure that we do get through this the next 6 months.
Apple, kiwi fruit and grape growers would like to see the government increase the number of short-term workers allowed from the Pacific under the recognised seasonal employer scheme, which currently brings just over 11,000 workers to New Zealand each year. The Immigration Minister, Ian Lees-Galloway, says that won't help growers who need workers right now, and they might just have to pay more for the job.
Immigration, of course, is part of the solution, but they probably need to have a look at things like pay rates, the conditions of the work. If they're in a desperate situation, they might need to consider other ways of attracting people to work for them.
Mr Lees-Galloway will be visiting Hawke's Bay in the next few weeks to discuss these workforce issues and those employing workers under the RSE scheme. In Napier for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
Up to 100 protesters marched down the main street of Dargaville this afternoon in opposition to plans to build New Zealand's biggest chicken farm. Tegel wants to build 32 poultry sheds on farmland just south of Dargaville, a farm raising 9 million chickens a year. Locals are worried about the effect it will have on their slice of rural paradise and the pollution it will create. The factory will be built behind the local marae, and the local hapu are worried it will stop people from coming home. Te Mana Korehi reporter Shannon Haunui-Thompson was in Dargaville today with cameraman Dan Cook.
These are the people who love living in the kaipara, and they love it just the way it is. They believe having a mega chicken farm in their area will destroy their way of life. One former kumara farmer has been living in Dargaville for over 40 years and doesn't believe there will be any benefits to the community.
I object to what Tegel are doing there. I'm concerned for our harbour, our river, the marae directly behind, for the toxic dust that's going to settle on our properties. There's so many things. There is not one redeeming feature about this. There is going to be a loss of jobs locally because of this. And like I say, no redeeming features.
So we're protesting against Tegel's massive proposal to put in a factory farm, a very industrial in our rural area that will completely change the landscape and the quality of life for all of the locals, not just in the kaipara, but actually it's nationwide, the effects. Letting this sort of thing get through in such a short time frame. We've had a month to submit, we've had to tell the public because the council haven't. We're just getting no feedback. Questions are not answered when we talk to council.
People here live on farms. This is a huge factory. This is a great insult to the land, to the people, and to our environment. And New Zealand is a very, very beautiful place. I think that Tegel putting this next to a marae is a great insult to the Treaty Waitangi.
The protesters marched all the way to the Kaipara District Council demanding to talk to the mayor. After being told Jason Smith wasn't there, he came out and spoke to the crowd.
There's a long way to go on this yet. There's a long way to go. The most important thing is that your submissions are made and heard.
Polytechnic and Mangarahu are national treasures here in our district, and this would be straight underneath them.
And the important thing is you need to make your voice heard. So if you need to adjust that submission, then find out how you can do so.
Betty Shine, queer of Kapehu Marae, was one of those who marched today. The proposed chicken farm is being built directly behind the marae, which sits on a hill about 15 minutes northwest of Dargaville. The marae has been there for 19 years, peacefully. For Ms Shine, the prospect of having a chicken farm, which plans to incinerate chicken waste and make the farm self-sufficient in energy behind the marae, weighs heavily.
It'll affect the farm, the marae in a lot of ways. We, first of all, would be the noise from around here when they excavate that hill. We won't be able to have our tangihanga here. We'll have to take our tūpapaku elsewhere to other marae and then bring them back here to bury them. The traffic, the odour that will be coming from them, the biodiversity here, like, you know, we have eels, fish in the sea and that's all won't be the same once that chicken farm comes here.
Her worst fear is it'll stop whānau coming home.
It's going to have a big effect on us because, like I say, our people are bringing their tūpapaku home now to bury them, and they think that that's going to be, you know, they're bringing them back here because they love it back here, but you know, with this thing going on, maybe they won't bring them back now.
More than 30 poultry sheds, each as long as a rugby field and 20 metres wide, will be 350 metres away from the marae's urupa or cemetery, which is going to mar the peaceful resting place for Ms Shine and her tupuna.
Well, there's not a lot of happy people around here, disappointed, more, you know, that they can come in here and do this to us. Also disappointed with the councils that they're willing to give them the resource consent to carry on with this, with the building of these sheds around here.
Part of the chicken farm's boundary would come within 5 metres of one side of the wharenui. So I'm standing right next to the wharenui here at Kapehu Marae, and only 20 steps away from the wharenui is the hill that is going to be excavated if this proposed chicken farm goes ahead. The limestone will be used to create bunds or small hills along State Highway 12, so you won't be able to see the chicken factory from the road. But that's small comfort to Betty Shine and others who live nearby. They're planning another protest for Monday. Kei Takiwira mo te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Shannon Haunui Thompson, aho.
Tegel says it recognises that its proposal to build a chicken farm of that size is of significant interest to the local community, which is why it voluntarily sought public notification of its resource consent. The company says in a statement that it is committed to working through with the local community this process. We will keep an eye on what goes on there. America's gun control debate delivered some surprises today, both in and out of the White House. Donald Trump held a bipartisan summit on gun control where he told lawmakers to come up with a comprehensive bill on gun reform and not to be so petrified of the powerful gun lobby, the NRA. And 2 major retailers in the US announced they were placing restrictions on gun sales. This all came as students at the Florida high school where a gunman killed 17 people last month returned to classes for the first time. The BBC's Nada Tawfik was there and has all the day's developments.
It was an emotional return for students of Stoneman Douglas High. Police and members of the community lined the walkway into campus for moral support. A flower, a hug, comfort ahead of their tough journey back to the scene of so much pain and loss. Inside, the focus was not on their studies, but on helping them heal, and teachers gave the students the space to readjust.
Today was a roller coaster. We weren't completely sure what to expect. All of our kids are at different stages of healing.
It was a tough day for Nicole Velasquez. She lost her friend Nicholas Dworet and still mourns his absence.
I literally saw him that exact same day at the beginning. In the morning, I actually saw him. And we hugged, we said Happy Valentine's Day, and that was the last I ever heard of him.
A makeshift memorial wraps around the school. It honors the 14 students and 3 staff members who were killed. Among the condolences from schools across the country, posters read "Never Again." Students have adopted that slogan as the name of their campaign to push for stricter gun measures.
This is the first time that survivors of a mass shooting have been so vocal about gun control in the United States. And despite the students' return to classes, they vowed to keep up the momentum. Their next major push is a march on Washington later this month.
At the White House, President Trump held a bipartisan meeting where he seemed to support expanded background checks for gun purchases and other measures.
We're going to come up with some ideas. Hopefully we can put those ideas in a very bipartisan bill. It would be so beautiful to have one bill that everybody could support.
But Senator Chris Murphy, who is a strong proponent of tougher action, called out the influence of the powerful gun lobby, the NRA.
The reason that nothing has gotten done here is because the gun lobby has had a veto power over any legislation that comes before Congress. I wish that wasn't the case, but that is. And if all we end up doing is the stuff that the gun industry supports, then this just isn't worth it.
Senator Chris Murphy ending that report from the BBC. Just a quick update on a story we've been following. Boutique supermarket Fara Fresh has announced it will buy the failed grocers market in Auckland from the receiver. Despite having no grocery or retail experience, disgraced real estate agent Aaron Drever bought the former failed Nosh store. This is in the suburb of Mount Eden in Auckland after it went into receivership. He opened it as the grocers market in November last year. Mr Drever took the business down the same road as Nosh. It was placed into receivership earlier this month with suppliers and employees owed hundreds of thousands of dollars. Fara Fresh CEO Bryce Howard says his offer is conditional, but he expects the store to reopen as Faro in a few months. He won't take over any debts though. Any outstanding bills from the grocers market will rest with the receiver. Finally tonight, a 9-year-old boy was left in tears last night when he found out the Bruno Mars tickets he and his mother got for Christmas were fake. The tickets were bought for more than twice the price on dodgy resale site Viagogo. Naraya and his mother Jessie were heartbroken when they were turned away from the concert last night at Auckland's Spark Arena. But as Laura Tupor reports, there was a happy ending.
Naraya and Jessie flew from Christchurch especially to see Bruno Mars perform. Photographer Carmen Bird says she was meeting a group outside when her friend saw Naraya crying.
Me and Renee went over and said, hey, what's up? And he was there with his young mum. She was like 24, he was 9, and asked them what happened, and they had bought tickets. Their nana had bought tickets for Christmas off Viagogo, and she'd paid $700 for the tickets, and then when they got to the counter, so they'd flown up from Christchurch, they got to the counter and they're like, no, these tickets are not tickets, or they've been scammed.
She says they then phoned Naraya's nana, who said she would buy more tickets, but the concert was sold out. Ms Bird says she posted on Facebook to see if anyone with tickets was no longer going.
We said to them, we'll sort it out, don't worry, we'll find you tickets, and they were sort of looked a little bit like, really? So, I don't know if they quite believed that we would.
After many attempts, she and her friend Alison Brewer decided to give up their tickets.
So they were happy, they were stoked. I mean, flown up from Christchurch, it was massive for them. It was really a no-brainer.
When you search Bruno Mars tickets online, the first website that comes up on Google is Viagogo. But as Sue Chetwin from Consumer NZ explains, don't be tempted to click on it.
You should buy off the official sellers. The reseller market was kind of meant to be, if you had a ticket and couldn't go, then there would be this market. But it's what it's turned into is, what Viagogo is doing is ripping people off blind, basically.
Viagogo has already got a no-go from Australia's consumer watchdog, who have taken legal action against the website. In January, a quarter of Australian Open fans who purchased tickets on the website were turned away. Ms Chetwin says New Zealand is doing its own investigations.
We certainly have joined other consumer organisations around the world. We've investigated them, you know, their tickets are shonky quite a lot of the time, and we think people should avoid them.
She says when people have issues, it's very difficult to get hold of Viagogo. Attempts at getting comment from them today proved that. In an email, RNZ News was referred to its frequently asked questions section. It says it provides redress for customers who can prove their tickets didn't get them into the event. But for those who are yet to use the tickets they bought from them, the managing director at Ticketek, Trina Tamati, says there's no one telltale sign a ticket is fake.
If you have purchased and you're concerned, I would make sure you check who the official ticketing agent is before you get to the venue, and give the official ticketing office a call and double check the legitimacy of the tickets.
Ticketmaster is the ticketing agent for the show but has not responded to requests for comment. Bruno Mars will perform in Auckland again at sold-out shows on Friday and Saturday nights. Mo te hotaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Laura Tupou ho.
And Laura and Bruno bring to an end Checkpoint for this evening. Thank you so much, everyone, for being with us. Have a wonderful evening. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Crown has indicated it will seek preventive detention for Colin Jack Mitchell, found guilty of kidnapping and assaulting a woman with intent to sexually violate her. The government moves to shore up cash-strapped polytechs and institutes of technology. People living in remote eastern Taranaki are still without power after the Cyclone Geeta storm. Frustration in Christchurch over the rising number of botched and missed quake repairs. And Bill English says goodbye. Our next news and weather is at 7.
On the 11th of this month, we lost singer-songwriter Tom Rapp, whose band Pearls Before Swine provided a soundtrack for late 60s counterculture with its almost contagiously pretty songs. It's time for a tribute.
She's the Snow Queen. She knows the ways of life.
Join me, William Dart, for New Horizons.